Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. There are approximately 15,000 nuclear weapons around the world held by 9 countries. Are we any safer today than we were several years ago? Would we be safer without these weapons? We'll find out today. My guest is an expert on this topic. Jonathan Granoff is the current president of the Global Security Institute. Mr. Granoff also serves as the co-chair of the American Law Association's Committee on Arms Control and National Security. Jonathan, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
I appreciate you being back with me. There's so much fast-breaking news in this industry with the nuclear weapons. We could do this about every week and get an update. But let's just briefly, what is the Global Security Institute?
Well, it's a nonprofit focused on advocacy for a safer, saner world without nuclear weapons. The visionary who founded it was a senator from California named Alan Cranston. He met Albert Einstein in the late 1940s, right after the bomb was created. And he was convinced that this was really the issue. If we got every other issue right and didn't get this right, it wouldn't matter. But he also had a moral insight. He had a motto: nuclear weapons are unworthy of civilization. So we started this nonprofit. People on our board of advisors include Mikhail Gorbachev, Jane Goodall, Oscar Arias, Rigoberto Menchu, Frank von Hippel. Frank von Hippel was the science and security advisor of the President of the United States. So we have very serious people. We have a program called the Nonpartisan Security Group, composed of the main diplomats who negotiated the arms control treaties that have helped us be safe enough to live. And we have parliamentarians for nuclear nonproliferation and disarmament, with over 800 parliamentarians the world over. Senator Ed Markey from Massachusetts is one of our co-presidents. And but the main point that I think we need to make today is to change the reliance on nuclear weapons as a means of pursuing security to a more cooperative approach. And that was Senator Cranston's greatest insight, that behind these weapons are a set of ideas that fail to recognize the need for global cooperation. And of course, Mikhail Gorbachev on our board, this is the insight that helped end the Cold War, when he and Ronald Reagan got together and was it 1985, and they said a nuclear war can never be won and therefore must never be fought. That motto has to become the motto, the baseline motto of all the countries with nuclear weapons.
It certainly
and
is.
we're devoted passionately to making that known and then advocating the methodologies to help get us there.
Well, you certainly have a great collection of people, brilliant minds, people who are very involved, dedicated to do this. And our viewers can go to your website at gsinstitute.org
Yes.
and get more information. I know for years you've been involved in a wide range of activities to focus attention on nuclear weapons and how devastating they are. You've been involved with interfaith groups also, and we're going to show a video in just a moment, but just give us a little brief overview of what that video will be about.
Well, first, the reason why it's important is that, I think 30 years ago, if you went to see your doctor with a stomach ache, he'd just give you a pill for your stomach. Today, if he's a good doctor, he's going to ask, what do you eat? How do you sleep? What are your relations like? He'd look at your whole body because it's a whole. And I think we need to approach security more holistically. And part of security involves, of course, the science of the weaponry, the geopolitics, but also the morality behind it. So you're going to see a video produced by one of the 3 major interfaith dialogues on the planet. There's the Religions for Peace. There's the Parliament of the World's Religions, where I serve as an ambassador for peace, security, and nuclear disarmament. And there's the United Religions Initiative. And this video is produced by that group, which is extraordinary. And you'll see people in it with real politic experience. The former Secretary of Defense of the United States, the former Secretary of State of the United States, and some diplomats who actually negotiated these treaties, taking the aspect that's usually neglected, the moral dimension of the weapons, the spiritual dimension. What's the spirit of humanity when we're pursuing security, risking the future? So I urge people to watch this carefully and see the spirit of it, the spirit of these men of experience. There's several in this video who had command, were involved in the command over these weapons. That's significant.
That's an excellent entree, and we're going to take a look at the video right now.
Thank you.
Each month, I have the great privilege of hosting a small group of diplomats, scientists, lawyers, religious leaders, and all of them are deeply involved in international nuclear weapons negotiations. I'd like you to meet these people, and then I'd like you to hear the prayer that we say whenever we get together.
I am Bill Perry. I'm a professor emeritus in the engineering school at Stanford University. I was the 19th Secretary of Defense of the United States, and before that, the Director of Defense Research and Engineering. My experiences through the years with nuclear weapons have made an indelible impression on me and convinced me that these immensely powerful weapons threaten no less than our own civilization. This has led me to make the primary task of my life working to ensure that they will never, ever be used again.
My name is Sidney Drell. I am a scientist, a physicist. Beyond my academic teaching and research career, I have spent many years as an advisor to the United States government on technical national security issues and nuclear weapons in particular. I recognize their almost unimaginable destructive potential and their capacity for destroying the human race. This is a capacity far beyond what we were created to acquire, and therefore I believe and work to get rid of these weapons as soon as practical before they destroy humanity.
My name is George Shultz, former Secretary of State under President Ronald Reagan, and this is my own prayer. Dear God, please bring common sense and divine guidance to our work on the problems that nuclear weapons pose to our world. Man has invented a means to destroy us all. We must eliminate these weapons in order to preserve a sane and peaceful world. We pray for your help as we work toward this goal.
I am Ambassador James Goodby, and the bombings at Hiroshima and Nagasaki have shaped my soul and my professional life, from my participation in the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty to my present efforts at seeking to dismantle, jointly with the Russians, the nuclear weapons legacy of the Cold War. President Kennedy said, "Here on Earth, God's work must truly be our own." I think that God's work is to rid the world of the present nuclear threat.
I am Monica Willard. The issue of eliminating nuclear weapons has shaped my life as a peace activist and as the representative of the United Religions Initiative to the United Nations. Knowing that nuclear weapons can be used by choice or accident, and that they have the capacity to destroy our planet and everything we love, calls me to action. A world without nuclear weapons is protection. For the love of our children, grandchildren, and future generations, for the beauty of the natural world, for a safer future, I offer this prayer.
I'm Jonathan Granoff. As a young man interning for a congressman, I met then Senator Robert Kennedy. He told us how close we came to destroying civilization during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He told us that eliminating nuclear weapons before they eliminate us is the practical and moral litmus test of our time. For many decades since, I've worked as an activist, an international lawyer, and a human being to rid the world of this threat. We need each other to do this, and we need God's grace.
I am Ambassador Thomas Graham, first with the Soviet Union, and later with countries all over the world. I have participated in arms limitation policy development and negotiations on behalf of the United States of America. Always, the overarching objective has been to control and eventually eliminate all nuclear weapons. And although much has been achieved in the past 70 years, the sword of mass destruction still hangs precariously over our heads. As long as there is breath in my lungs and urgency in my heart, I intend to do all in my power to banish these ungodly weapons from the face of the earth.
The beginning and the end are in your hands, O Creator of the universe.
And in our hands you have placed the fate of this planet.
We who are tested by having both creative and destructive power in our free will
turn to you in sober fear and in intoxicating hope.
We ask for your guidance, and we wish to share in your imagination as we deliberate about nuclear force.
Help us to lift the fog of atomic darkness
that hovers so pervasively over our earth, your earth.
So that soon all eyes may see life magnified by your pure light.
Bless all of us who wait today for your presence
and who dedicate ourselves to achieve your intended peace
and rightful equilibrium on earth.
In the name of all that is holy and all that is hoped. Amen.
Amen.
Today, the doomsday clock stands at 3 minutes till midnight, the highest level ever recorded. Instead of global alarm and efforts at reduction, the opposite is happening. Nuclear nations are quietly gearing up to modernize and create new and more powerful nuclear weapons. Rogue nations are neglecting their citizens in favor of advancing their nuclear status. Rogue terrorist groups are frantically trying to obtain nuclear materials and weapons. Nuclear weapons are built to be used sooner or later. But rather than stepping back from the brink, the world is dashing to plunge over the cliff. In this moment of nuclear madness, what can we do? The nuclear experts whom I know pray. They live into the direction that their prayers take them. They become advocates, and they join with others to build a global voice of nuclear abolition. We invite you to do the same. Our little group is called Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons, and we are part of the United Religions Initiative. If we can help you find your voice, feel free to reach out to us at uri.org. In case you think that your moral, spiritual voice is in the minority, please know every major religious group in the world has called for the abolition of nuclear weapons. Follow the prayer that is in your soul. Raise your voice. Save the world.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We'd invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved with a PBS or community access television station, or perhaps an educational institution that has an intra-campus television hookup, or you just have a computer, you have a website, you like our shows, you want to share them, please feel free to do so. Global Connections Television is provided at no cost as a public service to help us better understand international issues and how they impact our lives. Today we're taking a look at the whole issue of nuclear weapons and how devastating they can be and why we need to start looking at reducing or eliminating the stockpile. My guest is an expert in this area. Jonathan Granoff is the current president of the Global Security Institute. Jonathan, that was an excellent video. It was very inspirational, it was hard-hitting, and it was factual. how did you get involved in that, and how is it being received by people all around the world? I'm sure.
Well, I've always felt that that religions are the repository of much of the wisdom of the planet, and it's very important that the leaders of religions take on these global threats, because without the moral passion behind the political movements of the world, you can end up with policies that appear practical but are morally incoherent. We have to have the moral voice at the table. You know, we are looking at an economic system that's out of sync with the natural world. So we're seeing a huge movement recognizing that we cannot continue to destroy species at 1,000 times the evolutionary base rate. We cannot continue to rely on fossil fuel and melt the polar ice cap. We have to cooperate to protect the rainforests, the oceans. 50 to 70% of our oxygen is phytoplankton, comes from phytoplankton, which depends on the health of the oceans. And yet we're not governing it. Why? Because the major countries of the world are squared off, threatening each other with nuclear annihilation. And the religions of the world have largely been silent on these issues. They haven't exercised their moral persuasion. To his credit, Pope Francis has, in Laudato Si', his encyclical, talked about our responsibility to the environment. He's also talked about the responsibility of nuclear disarmament, and many of the world's religious leaders have spoken out. But at the local level, it's incumbent on people who speak to the heart, who speak to the soul, to say, is this the will of the Creator? Is this the will of your human conscience, your conscience, to threaten the very future? Is this something that you, in a democracy, want your representatives to continue to do? I think that it's time that the people of the world spoke from the position of conscience, spoke from the position of their religious persuasions, and said to their politicians, we expect you to grow up, talk to each other, you can do better. Look what Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev did. At that time, when they spoke in the 1980s, we had over 65,000 nuclear warheads ready to blow up the planet. Once they put in motion these treaties, the START Treaty, the INF Treaty, we've now gone down to less than 15,000. That's not an insignificant accomplishment, but it's not nearly enough, because less than 1% of that arsenal could end humanity. We have to keep going in that direction. The voices of conscience have to speak up, and the voices of science have to speak up, and we can no longer continue to have this wall that prevents the level of cooperation needed to deal with these very important global threats.
Exactly. And there are thousands of groups around the world. Yours, the United Nations, has been a focal point to bring together the countries to deal with this particular problem. Can we reduce this nuclear stockpile down to, I'm not going to say a manageable level, just reduce it to zero? Is there confidence building there that will allow us to do that?
Well, we have to build that confidence,
Right.
but there are many steps that go in that direction that that 191 nations in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty have agreed to, that walk down the ladder that would make us safer, that we have a political and moral obligation to fulfill. Part of the obligations of the countries with nuclear weapons in that treaty, which are the United States, Russia, China, the United Kingdom, and France, have agreed to do. This is not just a policy suggestion of you and I, but this is the agreement, the formal agreement that diplomats representing these countries have signed on to, include ending nuclear testing forever, a treaty cutting off the production of nuclear-capable fissile materials, strengthening the verification safeguard regimes that we have, the International Atomic Energy Agency, lowering the status of the nuclear weapons in posturing. Taking them off of alert would be an example of that. Mm-hmm. They're still in the alert status they were at the height of the Cold War. Then if you look at each of these steps, they increase the strength of the rule of law, they build greater cooperation, and they make us safer, and they're the very same things needed to get toward a nuclear weapons-free world. Are we doing this now? No. Mm-hmm. The United States presently has a president who's just pledged $1.7 trillion to modernize the arsenal and start a new nuclear arms race. Russia is mirroring this folly. and this will cause other states with nuclear weapons to similarly modernize and expand their arsenals. This is extreme folly.
It certainly is. And if you think about what you could do with $1.7 trillion, and we'll be lucky if it ever gets in under budget. Nothing that the Defense Department does ever gets in under budget. Absolutely. And that's a truism across the board. But if they took that 1.7 and put it into infrastructure development, into repairing bridges, roads, paying teachers more, that type of thing, you could have an economic boom in this country and around the world to a large degree, instead of putting it into these nuclear weapons. And these weapons they have now are aging, they're decrepit, there's a greater chance of having accidents. Something could accidentally happen that could endanger the entire planet.
I disagree with you about the
Couldn't happen?
stewardship. No, that could happen,
okay.
but it's not because they're aging and decrepit.
Oh.
They're quite lively, alive, and predictable in their delivery.
And that's frightening.
They definitely will go off. Over time, maybe the actual yield of the delivery might diminish or not predictable. But I don't think that anybody would care very much whether a nuclear bomb 20 times larger than Hiroshima only was 10 times larger than Hiroshima. It would still have its same effect. So the idea that that we're like, we have to do this to make us safer. No, stewardship is reasonable. Modernization is not. The issue is in the seats of power. The argument is prepare for war, receive peace. Peace through strength. Prepare for peace, instability occurs, war occurs. The precondition for social development to meet the sustainable development goals, eliminate poverty, protect the climate, all of these common goods that's real security. The precondition for that is peace and security. And the weapons bring peace and security. That's the argument. We have to meet that argument and say, well, you know what? That argument rests on two of your doctrines. One is strategic stability. But while you're pursuing strategic stability, you're also pursuing military advantage. Well, military advantage is mythical. Did military advantage prevail in Vietnam, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq? Is this what brings stability? Or did we learn something after World War II, where we had a Marshall Plan and we built trading partners and security? Did we learn nothing about how you build cooperation? The idea that we could depend on the threat of nuclear annihilation and not by accident, design, or madness use these weapons is preposterous. It's mythical and unrealistic. And the idea that in today's world we can, well, look at it this way. Imagine if the Biological Weapons Convention said no country can use polio or smallpox as a weapon, but we'll let 9 countries use the plague as a weapon. We would say that's clearly unsustainable and absurd. But that's precisely the regime we have globally for nuclear weapons. So it's a stimulus for spreading it because of its moral incoherence, but more importantly, having them on the ready and thinking that we will never make a mistake with computers. And we know that there have been many mistakes that have led us right up to the verge of destroying the planet Earth. The weather satellite was launched off the coast of Norway, and Boris Yeltsin didn't know whether it was a Trident launcher, whether it was a weather satellite. We came minutes from ending civilization. Similarly, we had a training tape put in Cheyenne Mountain in the United States that evidenced to our system that we were under attack, and we came within minutes. These sorts of things are part of the human condition. We shouldn't rely on good luck forever, and we know better. As I said, we have a route toward a safer world agreed upon by the nations of the world. If we don't live up to our treaty commitments, if we don't live up to strengthening the rule of law, if we don't live up to the moral imperative of doing better, if we don't recognize what science is telling us about our failure to cooperate to protect the ecosystem, I say we're living based on myth and superstition. The myth that we can continue to rely on these nuclear weapons, they won't go off. The myth that pursuing stability by military threats is going to bring cooperation. And the myth that we continue to burn the planet Earth and survive, that's mythical. I say it's time to become realistic. Let's see what science tells us. Yes. And also the other thing is we have two tools, law and morality. That's how we control our science. That's how we control our institutions. We've just seen this video on the morality. And I'm telling you as a lawyer, the law says that we need to move in the direction of disarmament.
We certainly do. And at the beginning of the program, I said, are we safer today with 15,000 nuclear weapons? You have made a compelling argument. The answer is no, we are not there.
We're not.
But Jonathan Granoff, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a
Thank
very
you.
informative program. We'll
wish
do
I
it
had been-
again.
I do have good news.
What is it?
The good news is that people all over the world are waking up and saying, we can, we must, and we will do better.
We can do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.